Things have been unhappy with all my lyrics. I'm just winging them on top of existing song bases. They've always been meant for other lyrics, and the big songs I have that I know now have words once I try and sing them, you know. This is why I need to play 8 hours a day. I guess I'm going to talk again, please, about I'm a political guy, I'm an environmental guy, I'm all kinds of things. Scientist, poet, you know. Not an engineer. I meant to be an architect, but school was screwed up, you know. Became all kinds of other things, including this. This is only part of me. So anyways, I'm looking now to see that because of the way I am and what I am in a country where people like me are not valued, that I want to go somewhere that they are. And I also know the dictum from the Havamal, you know, that never stay too anywhere too long. That's what's all my songs. I have lyrics about that now, you know, about keep on the road, you know. It's where someone like you belongs, so that you have a message that you have to take and you have a duty to go. I have a duty to go to these places I talk about. It's not just me wanting to go and to help France to do what I can, or to spread the revolution here if I can, you know, just to the young, get the young to do it, to realize they're being conned. If France takes hold, but the French are up against a lot, including the world media conglomerate, who are keeping it all secret from the rest of the continents. I know because of contacts in Asia. Now that I've got lots of African friends, I'm going to ask them what they're hearing about what's going on in Europe. And I've approved a lot of 100 or 200 Facebook requests today, and partly because I've been canvassing, but I don't know, people from around the world, what the hell? They see my face, they like my look, okay. Anyways, we'll see where all this goes. I'm going to need help with doing all the web management. Anyway, I'm going to sing one more song. I think I'm getting tired. I feel my heart going too. I need food. But that song was about being hungry. I'm just a hungry boy working hard for sweating, you know, and sweat for toys, you know. Gave my wife a diamond ring, then she took me for everything. Well, in my case, it wasn't a wife. Well, it wasn't only just one either. Mine beat me too, but that's okay. I understand the world. It's what's made me strong. It's having had all that go down, and now knowing what it is that I am and why that happened. Because people like me get into conflict with that certain other mentality, and there are better places for people like me, like Tom. You know, where I don't know. Tom Elvis, who's the president of Estonia, and I have a late friend who's a mutual personal friend. So that's a longer story, but I have contacts around Europe, and Mark and I are Norwegian, and Luke's half German, Luke Dedman. He'll be the bass player, I guess. You know, and then back east, and if we get through Nova Scotia, I want Dion to play with me. Dion McBath, you hear me, don't you, bro? Dion calls me the Mike Clevin experience. So I don't know, we don't have any really name yet, but I know for le gars qui sont les Canadiens, you know, les Canadiens, you know. If we go to France, you know, is what I think we should call ourselves, and maybe my friend Jarrell can say, hey, look, here's the manager for my club, why don't you play Paris for a week and we go stay in the apartment. You know, this shit happens in France. It doesn't happen in Canada unless you have the nice commercial package that somebody can make money off of. So I know discredit to the gentleman that I have a mutual friend, because I know his cousin was an old contact, and I won't name him, you know, but this is the standard in Canada. Unless you're like professionally produced, nobody wants to hear it, which is really hard for street musicians like myself, you know, and even Babe Cole, who's a wonderful voice. Babecoal. She has a wonderful voice. She sings the street corners of Vancouver in the rain with this really beautiful jazz voice. And she gets hassled by the city. Or busted. She adds to the dull glass and steel and concrete and empty commercial world of the mall that downtown Vancouver has become, and the travesty that both Robson and Granville are for what they once were as community streets, you know, what we were as a community. I welcome the new communities, but we have to build a common future here, and the only way to do that is by civilian democracy, is by mass referenda, demands for mass referenda. And yeah, there are, you know, of the communities here that were excluded from this vote. When they see the logic of what I say, perhaps they will go there, but it's not for me to argue, it's for them to discover it. But I see it coming, and I see the logic of the natives not voting, and why not, and what it says if they do, which means they acknowledge the presence of the crown, which they don't. This is a squat. British Columbia is a squat. Vancouver is a squat. Maple Ridge is a squat. The legal structure, the land structure, it's all a squat on top of somebody else's territory. This is the legal reality. And they don't vote, and that they didn't vote, but 5-6% of the population, it wasn't enough to win, but same with the young, they were excluded from the vote. The new peoples, they were excluded from the vote, and the poor mostly were certainly excluded from the vote, other than those that have addresses who might have voted before. But not all citizens voted in the referendum, which is why it was a travesty, and why what's necessary in France is needed here in British Columbia and in Canada. But there's too many people here in Canada that are only in it for their own lives. And they're too willing to cop out to a certain industry that they may currently work for without thinking of what else they can do. That we need new options, Alberta. Okay, you guys driving to Ontario, I've talked to you before, right? That we need other options in what you guys want. That you can learn them. There's all kinds of things we can do in geothermal and new kinds of energy, and ways that houses have to be rebuilt and neighborhoods rebuilt, and we have to think for free fire, use fire, what's going to happen when the water's all gone. Like, boys, you got all kinds of work coming if you just settle down, okay? We do have to change not just the government, we have to change the system of government. And because we are where we are, it really means that happens to happen in the U.S. too. And that's a perilous process on that side due to this side of the wacko right there in the religious, and the way U.S. politics is. So we're in a dangerous situation because of the various treaties. And this is also why I believe we're British Columbia, even though we can try and do what we want for a while, ultimately geopolitically, we're doomed. Alaska's there, Washington's there. It's that simple. We've been in the jaws of a vice for 160 years. This is the brutal truth of it. Britain barely got what they have. Okay, this is the whole point of British Columbia. This is the last toehold on the coast that Britain retained. It's a long story. My friend Daniel Marshall of UVic has a book on the period called Claiming the Land, British Columbia and the New El Dorado, and there's another one by Don Houka that I recommend, which is called McGowan's War. McGowan, McGowan. Long story about what those books are about. British Columbians, and people knew here. I'm speaking as Skookum1, the UnProfessor now. People knew here. They need to know the history of what happened here, and not just the history of their own ethnic group, which gets heavily politicized in academia. I dislike the academic current historiographical literature. I find it, I won't get into it here. But there's more things that people need to know, no matter where they're from, about how the colony was founded, what it's constituted, things that happened to it during the role of the imperialist, corporate, industrialist extraction political system. Colonial parliamentary system, provincially and federally, is only designed to expedite resource exploitation and export as a colony. We're no longer only Britons. Now we have this overlap between U.S. and China, and it's a dangerous overlap. It's now at confrontation level. It hasn't reached violent confrontation, but it's reached the courtroom in a really nasty way and harmed Canada's relations with China. But we still are like the Chinese footprint in North America more than anywhere else. Even in Calgary and Markham, maybe in Toronto. There's certain parts of Canada where the Chinese expat colony is strong, same with Singapore and other places. Right? We're part of the Chinese diaspora. And those people are wealthy and they're powerful within British Columbia, and they need to also wake up to the polity of their own kids or their future as a state, which is bad democracy this year. And civilian democracy is like what happened in Tiananmen, what the people of Tiananmen Square were asking. Back in, was it 91? Man, that was dramatic, And then finally the tanks came, and the image of the guy standing in front of the 27th Army came into Beijing because the native army of the city, the 28th Army, would not attack the citizens of the city. It was all their own families. So they brought in the 27th Army from Inner Mongolia, which is the fringe against the Soviet opinion at that time. And these are crack troops because they've been on the anti-Russian frontier, right? These are the best troops China has. They come into Beijing and they shut down Tiananmen by force. It's been forgotten now. I don't even know what my Chinese new friends know about it. I'm going to ask Mr. Guo sometime for LBT. Ask him to tell me, please, tell me what he knows. And shut up about what I know. You see, I've got to learn to listen to the other elders. And I've realized as far as the elders go, there's certain elders in this Latvian country that know me and welcome me and like me when I'm there, but I know as a community, I belong somewhere else. It's like my dad having come there and my uncle having come there from Norway. It's like me having come from there, I need to go to Norway. It's that kind of a thing. And tell Norway about the Norwegians of the British River country. I'm Norwegian, I'm going to do it in Norwegian. I make videos in more languages, the languages I can speak. I need to be an international person. That's the reason for my Patreon appeal again. I need to be an international person, which I once was, but under less opulent but less fortunate circumstance, so let's put it that way. And it all came crashing down. But that's fine. It's a long time ago now. But it's part of my tale. It's part of how I got to Delphi. How I got to various places. Including the Estate Theatre in Prague. And Epidavros, the great theatre where, as it, I brought it up tonight as part of my Franco-Norvégien. It's a place I want to play. And also the Rodion in Athens, because you can't play in the around Athens. I want to play Athens, I have to play acoustic at Delphi and Olympia. I can see that, of course, I respect the ancient sanctuaries. Coast, the places I've been. I like to go to Karnak, I like to go to Haran, and the places around there. I want to, wherever, I want to be a roaming soul for the rest of my years. Traveling the world with my guitar. I set out in 2007 when I lost my place. I walked away from all my things with as much as I could carry. Mostly my guitar. I didn't have a computer for a long time. I only logged in every once in a while. Singing songs, Prince George, Wells, Barkerville, around Oliver, wound up in Winlaw, around Nelson, and I caught a bus from Montreal, caught a ride to Nova Scotia, got stuck there after thinking I was going to take a ride across the Atlantic in a sailboat that went down anyway. He lived, but anyways, I stayed in LA for a few years. Had to move out, went to the Nevis Valley, had to move out. Took off for BC, lived the winter in Penticton, had to come down to Vancouver thinking I had work, but Vancouver clamped its evil iron, the judgmental jaws on me again, and no work. So I wound up having something else happen. Someone else shows up from back east and then gets weird, right? So I have to get out the door and just decide, fuck this, I'm going to go back to Nova Scotia where people are nicer. And I got back there, and then my mom died, and then I went back to BC, and I wound up going to St. John's without money for a long time until my money came. Rather than go to Europe, I wound up going to Thailand. And all through that, I had the guitar out in the snow, in the rain, sitting on Winkle Road, or various certain spots in Montreal or Vancouver, Burnaby, a little bit Toronto, Ottawa a little bit. I don't think I recorded in PEI. I did record on the ferries crossing from North Sydney to Placentia and Port aux Basques. So I'd like to see more of Newfoundland. I'd like to go back with money. I'd like to play the Mile 1 Center and blow people's minds. There was this hippie that used to hang out in the street and didn't play well at rallies when he showed up. The vibe in St. John's bars. The punk alternative bars, but I just don't go to bars unless I'm going to play it. I can't stand all the other people's music, I know that sounds selfish, but it's the way it is. You got other people's thoughts in your mind, and just the socializing, the drinking, and talking trivialities. I'm not good at it. I don't know. Being around the lounges of the great biennales and stuff like that around Europe, and even the hair in high society. If I'm wearing the right clothes in Europe, is more than fine. I don't have to tie it up so long as everything else is groomed and I'm dressed well. It's the look of a scholar poet, And that's why I left it out tonight rather than tie it up. And it feels different when you tie it up. It doesn't function as an antenna. You don't have any of this going on. Speaking of which, I'm just going to play some fun now. So I got to think of what to play.